Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk. We are a little bit later than we planned on being, but we're up and rolling. Sean Stiers, Jesse Stiers. Jess, how are you tonight?
I was doing well until all of these technical difficulties, but I think I figured it all out by this point.
All right. All right.
I have
Well,
to apologize to everyone because it sounds like it was my doing or my fault.
I don't know. We don't have to get into all those details. We're here. That's all that matters right now. We're here.
I was busy crunching a lot of numbers today.
Man, Ivan coming hard on the Cubs, saying they're terrible. I don't know. Ivan,
that's really crazy because they've scored the most runs since the All-Star break. They're literally lighting the ball on fire right now.
They're averaging
Dansby
7.5
Swanson
runs
has
a game.
like 4 home runs in 3 games.
Yes.
I think they're the hottest team in baseball, arguably the last 2 weeks.
Even Tommy, who doesn't pay attention to baseball, is like, all right, Ivan, relax, chill. You know where it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you get freaking Tommy fired up about some baseball, you've obviously said something that's out of line.
Yes, Paul says, hard to believe, but I guess they'd start at exactly 2:17 p.m. my time. And I'm trying to figure out where Paul could be. Are you on an island off the Pacific? Are you in Alaska?
Like California or Hawaii.
Yeah. Hawaii, I think it would be like even 1:17 or noon even. But glad to have you with us, Paul. You want to talk some Notre Dame football since we're a little bit behind tonight?
We can definitely get into some.
Tommy, Paul's in Alaska. We have that confirmed. Tommy, ask your baseball question so I can star it up and we'll save it for rapid fire. I didn't realize he
wants me to ask. He's going to ask about Syndergaard. What do I think of Syndergaard in Cleveland?
All right. Get that question in, Tommy, and we'll do that in a little bit. What we're going to do tonight, we started talking a little bit yesterday in the mailbag about who's going to be Notre Dame's leading receiver, and what order potentially are they going to be, what are the top 5 or 6? What's it all going to look like? And so I figured we did a show like this last year. Let's just do it. We're a few weeks away from the start. I mean, it is we're 23 days away from the start of the football season at this point. So let's make some receiver predictions we're going to go top 8. We're going to go who we think the top 8 are going to be for Notre Dame. And I kind of looked at this. I went, you look back, Irish receivers had 211 receptions last year for nearly 2,700 yards. Then you look at Wake Forest, where Sam Hartman was. Their receivers had 302 receptions for 4,500 or 4,055 yards. That's primarily with Sam Hartman, but Mitch Griffiths was in there as well. So when we did this last year, we went through, we made all these predictions, who's going to have what, and then you started adding up Vince's totals, and I think Vince literally had more than 5,000 passing yards for Tyler Buchner, by the time it was all, based on, how many yards he had for each receiver. I thought we'd keep it closer, a little bit, again, what's it going to look like? We don't exactly know between the rushing attack, but you're going to have a more downfield attack with Hartman. I'm figuring somewhere between 280 and 300 receptions. And what do you think? 3,500 yards for our yardage benchmark. Do you think that's a good number, give or take?
I had 330 receptions for 3,517 yards.
So you added all yours up, and that's what you have.
Huh? Correct.
Okay. All right.
I ran models today.
Beezer says he needs the whiteboard soon. Season is almost here. You will get more whiteboard once the season commences. You might even get it a little bit more before the season commences. But yes, okay. So you're a little bit more generous with yours. And I'm going to say I had a hard time because, like, I set the parameters for the receptions and the yardage, and then I started going through for mine, and then I added them all up, and I'm like, well, I'm way over. I'm in Vince territory right now, So we're only going to rank the top 8. We're not going to go all the way down because last year they had 6 different guys in double-digit receptions. They had 2 others with 9, and then you had like the stragglers that rounded it out. I think it ended up being like 12 or 13 total guys had receptions last year. So we will do our top 8. Was this a pretty hard task for you? Like to crunch this out to kind of figure out what it was all going to look like?
It was not. Once I determined what I wanted to work with, it wasn't overly hard.
Okay.
I'm excited. I built mine in Excel, so I'm excited.
Ooh, you want to just we'll have you share it at the end.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, so I can kind of give a breakdown of what I was looking for here.
Okay.
I hope it makes sense.
All right. Let me ask you this first of all. Is the guy you have with the most receptions also your yardage leader?
Yes.
Okay. Mine is I want to double check and make sure. Mine is different. My receptions leader, my yardage leader, different guys. Get us started, Jesse. Who do you have leading Notre Dame in both receptions and yardage this season, and how much?
I have Tobias Merriweather as the leading wide receiver.
Okay.
Tobias Merriweather will have 1,142 yards.
Wow. Okay.
And he will have 97 receptions.
Wow. You're going from one catch for 41 yards to All-American status overnight.
Correct.
Okay. So I have Tobias as my number 1 yardage guy. By the way, did you figure out what 97 for 1,102, like what the yards per catch is on that?
I can quickly tell you that it only, and I say only, it's around 8 catches per game. And the average reception would be about 11 and a half per reception.
See, that's no bueno. He's not going to be an 11-yard per reception guy. I'm sorry.
That's why you built your numbers and I built my numbers, and we can compare at the end of the season.
Yes, I built the correct numbers. Jesse built his numbers.
Well,
that's the way it's...
some of us have a degree in math. Some of us don't.
That's true, but that doesn't make you right, because there's no way that Tobias Merriweather is only going to average 11 yards per catch this season.
Hey.
Okay, so my receptions leader is Jaden Thomas. And I have Jaden at the top, 59 receptions for 785 yards. He had 25 for 362 last year. And my 59 for 785 comes out to 15.7 per catch. Very respectable, a guy who can stretch the field a little bit. Are people coming at you now?
No, you are coming at me.
So I've got Jaden Thomas, 59 for 785, and Jesse has Tobias Merriweather at 97 for 1142. I mean, a lot of yards, but that's a lot of receptions to get it as well. And again, I think because of his vertical threat, I think he's going to be. I just don't think he's going to be the volume guy. He's still going to get a decent number. I have Tobias number 2 on the receptions list, number 1 on the yardage list. I have Tobias 47 receptions, 820 yards. That comes out to 17.4 per reception. What do you think about that?
You said 17.4 per reception?
Correct.
I think that sounds about right. Again, you talk about the vertical threat and getting the ball downfield, and that's mainly what he's going to be used for. So I think that my receptions might be a little bit off. But again, this was I was crunching numbers rather quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if that number is actually more down to like the 75 area.
Okay. So you've got Tobias number 1. I've got him number 2. I've got Jaden Thomas number 1. Who's your number 2 guy on your list?
My number 2 guy is Jaden Thomas.
Okay. And what kind of production do you have for Jaden?
I have Jaden Thomas at 515 yards, over 50 receptions.
Okay. All right. That's not too far off from what I've got. You've got 50 for 515. I've got 59 for 785. I've got him with more yards. And again, your yards per catch is going to be pretty low with Jaden Thomas. And if you're looking at last year's quarterbacks, Drew Pine especially, then I think that makes sense. But you've got you're a little bit you're not stretching the field very vertically with your numbers so far, math guy.
I am not.
All right. So we both got Thomas and Tobias 1 and 2, depending on where. Chris Tyree is my number 3. Is he your number 3?
He is not my number 3, but he was a close number 3.
Okay. So I've got Tyree number 3. I've got him 40 receptions, 490 yards. That's 12.2 per catch. He had 24 for 138 as a running back, of course, last year. And I kind of looked at this, and again, I know that Sam Hartman is not going to be running the Wake Forest offense, don't get me wrong, but the way he used the slot receiver, their slot receiver, Taylor Morin last year, 47 catches for 575. So I've got Tyree 40 for 490. So, fairly similar, I think, to what Wake Forest's slot guy was doing last year.
My Chris Tyree numbers were very similar. I had 440 for 45 receptions.
Okay. And where do you have him? You said you didn't have him number 3. Do you have him number 4?
Number 4, correct.
Okay. And say the numbers again.
440 for 45 catches.
Okay. Yeah, we're right in the same ballpark.
I'd like to amend Tobias to 75 catches, please.
Okay, you're going to drop him 75. All right.
That puts him about 15.2 yards per catch. I like that number a lot better.
You've been playing with your fuzzy math trying to figure out what gets in.
That's the only one that's the only one I'm adjusting.
Okay. All right, that's fair. That's fair. Had to drop him quite a bit though. You dropped him about 20 plus receptions.
That's about 2 receptions per game less. I like that number. It brings his average catch to about 15 yards, and it goes back to what you brought up, just a really solid point of he's going to be more vertical than anything. Thomas is going to be your over the middle kind of shorter route guy. But I still think he's going to Merriweather's still going to lead the team in receptions.
So Chris asks, are we basing Tobias as number 1 based on talent? I mean, that's pretty much what we have to go on, right?
I just think he's
and what we've seen so far
in a room that has a lot of inexperience, and you combine inexperience with the potential for the high ceiling. That's kind of where I'm yielding Tobias to be the top dog this year.
I had a hard time figuring out, again, like you've got him at 75. I've only got him at 47, but I've got him with 820 yards, which again is a 17.4 yard per catch average. I think he's going to be at least 16 yards per catch this season. And, I was flirting with, do I really think he's going to get 18? Obviously, you're talking about a guy who had 1 catch last year, but we have at least a body of work to look at from the spring, as well as what we've seen in bits and pieces so far this fall. Granted, we haven't seen a lot this fall, but we do get like some highlight videos and stuff like that every now and then. And with what we know of Sam Hartman, we've talked about this before. You have to remember, like Jaden Thomas and Jaden Greathouse both got to play with Sam Hartman in the blue gold game. And as a result, what happened? They both had big games. Greathouse had the bigger game. Tobias Merriweather didn't get to play with Sam Hartman in the blue gold game. So most fans probably are still wondering a little bit about Tobias Merriweather, but other things that we got to see in the spring and the talent that he has, and the fact that, when they run him out there, he's out there number 1. He's going to be a number 1 guy. So, all those factors, I think that's kind of what we're basing that on. Personally, again, I think 75 is a little bit high, but I think he's going to have a pretty good amount of yards and I think he's going to end up like for guys who have, let's say, at least 20 receptions or so. I think he's going to be the yards per catch leader of the group this year as well.
Oh, 100%. And I just think the reason why I have so much confidence in his receptions really is because I believe Sam Hartman can throw the ball where he knows his wide receivers can make a play.
Right.
He
Right.
knows where to put a ball, even if it's a tight window or a guy that's kind of draping on him in coverage or whatever the situation might be. I think Sam Hartman has one of the best talents in college football of throwing his wide receivers open at times. He knows how to get his wide receivers the ball that are going to, again, I don't think a lot of quarterbacks can make some of those throws or trust their throws knowing that, this is what my wide receiver can do. And I know that, if I put it here, really, he's the only guy who can go get it.
Yeah, and I think that so far in terms of like we've seen Chris Tyree go vertical as well, and Sam Hartman throwing it to him vertical. We saw some of that earlier this week. Excuse me, I think on Monday at the practice that we got to see where Hartman was focusing on Tyree with some of the deep routes, like he was throwing to him as much as possible. But like when you look at like Chris brings up the back shoulder to Thomas with that big body that he's got. And Thomas has been working outside quite a bit. So I think you're probably going to see like Tobias at the Z and then Tyree in the slot, which is the F receiver. And then, a lot of Jaden Thomas at that X as well, because of that physical body that he's got. And I think you're absolutely right. Like he's going to be able to throw downfield and these guys with the ability that they've got, the skill sets that they've got, I think that they're going to be able to benefit quite greatly. So you've got Tobias at 1, Thomas at 2, Tyree at 4. We skipped your 3. I'm interested. Who is your number 3 receiver?
Deion Colzie.
Oh, okay. My pen just stopped working. Go ahead. Tell me why what you've got for Colzie.
47 for 480 yards.
47 for 80 for Colzie. So my stock isn't as high on Colzie right now. And again, we were talking about these guys a little bit last year. I've got him a lot lower. I just think there's going to be a lot less volume from Colzie. And I think that kind of that role that we saw last year where he can be a chain mover type guy, like situationally a guy that they can count on, third down situations and that kind of thing. I think that that's going to be more his role. So I have him all down at number 6. I've got him with just 16 catches for 175 yards.
Yeah, so if you look at Wake Forest last year, their top leading receiver had 81 receptions, and after that it was 47, and then 42, and then 39. My big chunk, Tobias matches that 81 at 75. Jaden Thomas matches the 47 with 51, and then Colzie matches the 42 with 48 receptions. So my numbers, again, are based off a lot of what Sam Hartman did at Wake Forest last year, and then assuming better wide receivers this year at Notre Dame. I can't wait to show you the breakdown on this Excel formula, but it gets kind of crazy in there.
What's like when you look at what happened last year, we heard this summer, like some national guys talking about, who's he going to throw to at Notre Dame? Who's going to step up? They don't have any receivers and all this different stuff. Well, A.T. Perry was Wake Forest's number 1 receiver last year. He's 6'5", 205 pounds, like similar to Tobias Merriweather, but he had 81 catches for over 1,000 yards last year, and he was a 6th-round pick of the Saints. So, like that, 81 catches for over 1,000 yards. That's pretty good, right? But he, so it's not like, again, he goes in the 6th round. So I guess my point is, it's not like the receivers made Sam Hartman, like some people I think again this summer maybe would have kind of led you to believe. I think it's the other way around, and Sam Hartman's going to have a lot more around him now than he had at Wake Forest.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I saw like an uptick in some of these guys, right? Like I based it a lot of these numbers off of Notre Dame's numbers last year, Wake Forest's numbers last year, and then basically the Sam Hartman factor. What is he going to add? And that was kind of my overall thinking. when breaking it down. And the combination of, like you said, these wide receivers, they weren't great. And so you pair maybe, a little bit better of wide receivers athletically. And then you pair Sam Hartman stepping in compared to last year's numbers. And that was kind of my overall thought process.
So I've got Jaden Greathouse as my number 4.
Ooh.
Is he your number 5 or do you have him lower?
Nope. I have him lower. I have Holden Stays at number 5.
Okay. So I've got the great one, as Salty likes to call him, Jaden Greathouse. I've got him for 35 receptions for 500 yards. That's a 14.2 yard per catch number. And I'm pretty confident that he's going to be in that ballpark. So, I mean, I'm confident that most of these guys are, but again, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, just based on bringing in a quarterback and a different system and all that stuff. But I think Greathouse is going to have, not one of the best freshman receiver seasons of all time, but I think it's going to be a really solid season with 35 catches for 500 yards. It'll be more than a Notre Dame freshman has had in quite some time.
So I had Holden Stays with 40 receptions and 300 yards.
40 for 300, and that is your number 5, the tight end. I've got Stays next on my list at I've actually got him at number 5 as well, but I've got him with less production than you had. I've got 20 catches for 200 yards. I just think that these tight ends, like the tight ends, I've got 2 in my top 8, but I don't think that they're quite going to add up to what Michael Mayer did last year, because as we've talked about a few times, I just feel like this is going to be a more downfield offense, one where the quarterback has the ability to find the receivers downfield, throw them open. He doesn't have to see a receiver come open. He'll throw the ball to the spot before the break, throw it on time more, I think, than we've seen Notre Dame quarterbacks do in the last several years. So that's why I've got more of the receivers higher on the list and the tight ends a bit lower. So you've got Stays. You've got Stays with double the receptions I have. You've got him with 40. I've got him with 20, but you've got him with 300 yards. I've got him with 200 yards.
Yep.
All right. So who's next then? Your number 6 is who?
Mitchell Evans.
Okay, so you've got both the tight ends back to back. And what have you got Evans doing?
I got Evans for 25 and 250.
Man, did you add these receptions up at the end?
I did.
What did you come up with again?
302.
Wow. And that's just your top 8. You're not even factoring in like the other guys who are going to catch some balls here and there, right?
Correct. But Wake Forest's top 8 receivers had 282 last season. So it's really only a 20 reception jump. So but again, 1.5 per game.
They didn't have the running game that Notre Dame is going to have.
Notre Dame's going to score a lot of points.
Okay. So you've got the 2 tight ends combining for 65 catches and 550 yards. That is ballpark what Michael Mayer did last year. He had 67 for over 800 yards. At least the receptions wise, you're right there. I've got Mitchell Evans, 16 catches for 185. So my 2 tight ends add up to 36 receptions for 385 yards. I just feel like they're going to be more possession guys, or, catch a ball here and there when other guys are covered and Hartman is able to find them open. So I just don't think that the tight ends are going to be nearly the factor that they've been the last few years with guys, whether it's Michael Mayer, Tommy Tremble before that, or, on and on, go down the list. I think that the tight end production is just going to drop off this year. So Evans is your 6. Colsey was my 6. So we each have 2 more. Actually, yeah, Evans is my 7. I'm sorry. So Evans is my 7 after Colsey. I've got them both with 16 catches. So I've only got 1 more to go on my list. You've got 2 more to go on yours.
The next one I had is Jaden Greathouse, 10 yards, 10 receptions for 195 yards.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Jaden Greathouse, 10 receptions, 95 yards, or 195 yards. 195 yards.
All right. So you don't think that Jaden Greathouse is is going to produce. You think it's going to kind of follow the trend of Notre Dame freshman receivers past, huh?
Correct. I think he'll get some playing time. But I think even the best of the best don't see a lot of playing time early on at wide receiver at Notre Dame, especially the last couple seasons. I just don't know if it's going to be handled like the Merriweather situation of last year. A lot of talent, but really didn't see the field well. I don't know how much farther along he is in the playbook compared to Tobias Merriweather. I don't know what his blocking on the perimeter looks like, because that's going to get you a lot of playing time if you can block on the perimeter, even when you're not throwing the ball. So there's a lot of things that play into Greathouse's game besides just catching the ball. I think he's a fantastic wide receiver. I think he's going to get his opportunities. I think he's going to be the best freshman wide receiver that they've seen in a long time, and definitely of this class. But I just don't see him putting up a ton of yards super early.
Okay. Angelo asks if Greathouse will get reps at the boundary as well as in the slot. I believe that he will with the body that he has. He can play inside or outside, just like Jaden Thomas can as well, which is why I'm, not just that, but just watching what he has done. And like when you look at his route running ability in practice, it stands out, especially for a freshman, and the physique that he has, the catch radius, the skills. There's just
Michael Floyd is a comp, right?
Somewhat, I think. I don't think, again, I don't think that he's going to put up Michael Floyd numbers.
Well, I'm just talking like body size, strength,
similar
catch radius.
Yeah.
Going up and getting the ball, strong hands.
Chris makes a fair point. Taming the expectations for Greathouse, but secretly think he will lead the team. Now, I don't know about lead the team, but Chris also says, depends on coaching. Freeman was reluctant to play Merriweather last season, so he could hold Greathouse back a bit. Now, the X factor here is the fact that you have a new offensive coordinator. And Freeman said at the end of spring, right after the Blue Gold game, these freshmen, maybe all three of them are going to play this year. But he expected at least one of them, and he expects at least one of them to be out there playing. And just based on what we've seen so far, Greathouse is definitely the leader of the three to get the most playing time right now. And they have also said, whether it's Jared Parker or Marcus Freeman, like on this whole freshman, how do you get them, like getting young guys on the field who are a little bit less experienced and all that stuff. I think that there's going to be a lot less reluctance to get these young guys out there. Again, like using what we've talked about a little bit with Jalen Sneed, find what they can do well, work off that first as they, build up the broader base of knowledge, figure out what they do well, get them on the field. And, if the games play out against some of these opponents early on, the way we think they will, then that should, lend itself to younger guys getting out there on the field and getting more opportunities anyway. But I just feel like Jaden Greathouse is going to have a pretty solid freshman season this year.
So Salty Virginia Peanuts had a comment about 6 comments ago that says, Jesse, he has exceeded those numbers in a single game. Well, that single game is a spring game where everyone gets to play. And that's not against another competition. And that's not, stacking up the top wide receivers in the room and determining who's getting playing time and et cetera, and et cetera. And I understand the hype around him, but I just don't see him. I think his ceiling is probably being like the 3rd leading receiver on the team this season.
The list is long of players who have stood out in the spring and then never been seen, never to be seen afterwards. Now, I don't think the Greathouse is going to fit into that, but again, you can't base too much on what you see in one spring game. It's an inter squad scrimmage where you've got 1s versus 2s, and in some case 1s versus 3s, 2s versus 4s, and all that kind of stuff. And again, like the different, who you've got throwing the ball, all those different things. The talent is there, but I'm not going to get carried away just because he had a good spring game with Sam Hartman throwing the football. Paul said he was going to say Tate and Brown. Golden Tate took much longer to pick up the offense. They were when he was a freshman, when they would get him out there on the field because of the speed that he had. One, he was very raw with the route running. Jaden Greathouse compared to Golden Tate as a freshman, it's like a fifth-year pro to a freshman almost. Like when you look at the preciseness of how they run routes. Golden was pretty much a go route type guy, and they would literally get line him up. Whichever direction they were going, they would have him line up as closest to the Notre Dame sideline as possible so they could yell to him from the sideline what he needed to do when he was a freshman. So very raw as a freshman. We all know he went on to a nice career, won a Super Bowl, all that stuff. But I think great house compared to Tate as a freshman, completely different skill sets. Right,
I would
now.
say so too.
Yeah, I like those. I like the Tim Brown and Michael Floyd comps a lot better than Tate.
So who's your number 8?
My number 8 is Jadarian Price, running back, only running back on my list. And I was toying with, do I have him higher? Do I keep him lower? But, like when you look at all these different receivers and the tight ends who ended up there, I've got Price with 12 catches for 140 yards this year.
Nice. So my last one came down to Rico Flores or Jadarian Price, actually. I think Rico Flores is going to get some opportunities out there too. I have him for 10 receptions for 185 yards.
10 for 185. All right. I just saw. Oh, we're getting text from Vince right now. All right. He's trying to guess where Notre Dame is going to practice. Paul says Tate because of his lower body strength. I can see that. Definitely strong in the lower half. But so Jesse again. Jesse has Tobias going over 1,000 yards this year.
I've 75 receptions.
I've got Tobias 820 yards, and Jaden Thomas, the receptions leader, with 59, 785 yards. Jesse has Thomas 50 catches, 515 yards. And I think the biggest disparities that we have are Deion Colsey and Jaden Greathouse. We actually have pretty good disparity with the tight ends as well. Like I have Stays and Evans combining for 36 catches and just short of 400 yards. Jesse has the two tight ends, 65 catches, 550 yards. Jesse has Colsey 47 for 480. I've got him 16 for 175. And I have Greathouse 35 catches, 500 yards. Jesse has him 10 for 195. So there you go. You want to put that spreadsheet up?
Yeah, let me.
Is it worth seeing?
I think so. I hope so. Just you can have an insight into my mind here a little bit. There it goes.
I don't know if we want that, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. It should be up.
Oh, there it is. So let's see what we got.
Hopefully, let me zoom this in a little bit.
Let's see. That's a little hard to see, but what do we got?
Is that a lot better? I think that's a lot better, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this is Wake Forest's stats last year.
Does this substitute for a whiteboard, by the way?
Yeah, this is that's a good point. This is a substitute for a whiteboard right now.
Okay.
So these numbers, this is Wake Forest's top 8 wide receivers. And this is receptions. This is yards. This is Notre Dame's last year with yards right after. And so then these are the breakdown of it. That's 282 combined receptions for 3,900 yards. Notre Dame's were 198 receptions for about 2,500. That's the average yards per catch between the two. And then this number right here is basically the percent increase between the two numbers. And this is important. So what this is saying is that between Notre Dame and Wake Forest saw a 57% increase in total yards. I took that number. That's basically the Sam Hartman effect right there, or a multiplier. I took that number times all of Notre Dame's yards last year, and that's what yielded this column right here. So 0.57 times 809 will get you 460 and down the list. And then I added that 460 back into Notre Dame's top receiver from last year, right? And so that was basically, again, that's the Sam Hartman effect, 57%. and I added that to 809, and that's where you get the 1269. I thought that this column was a little bit high, and so I did a 10% reduction on that to get this column right here, and those are my breakdown of the yards, and then I assigned the names to the yards based off of who I thought would achieve those yards.
Wow. That's a lot of math.
But it all comes down to this number to me. This is the percent increase in yards, and that's the multiplier that I think is like that's the Sam Hartman effect.
Okay.
So that was kind of that was the thinking behind all of this.
Salty says, check your numbers. You have a glitch that deprioritized the great one.
So like that was the thing. Like I yielded these numbers, and then I came up with the group of 8 who I thought would be the top 8, and then I assigned each of those to those numbers. So
so you came up with the numbers and then just plugged in who you thought would match with those numbers.
Correct.
Interesting.
And so Great House could easily move up to.
I mean, in that case, I can see why you would get Tobias at the top, because I think he is the logical pick, again, for the most yards. I just don't know that he's going to get quite that many yards, especially when you have Jaden Thomas there. I think we're both in agreement. Those are going to be the top 2 guys. It's a matter of.
Do you want to see something super cool, though? I had to like triple check this, right?
If it's more math, I don't know how super cool it is. So
I think it's pretty cool. So I told you how I added these 2 numbers together, and that's what this column is right here. Well, if you take the sum of this entire column, which is just a repeat over here, I just put them in order from largest to smallest.
Okay.
The sum of that column is 3908. Look at how many total receiving yards the top 8 receivers had last year for Wake Forest.
Wow, 3908.
Right on the head. That's I couldn't believe that. I kept looking at that, but it makes sense to me. It's crazy how these 2 numbers ended up equaling one another after all the math, but to me it kind of shows some consistency.
Whew, man. Okay.
That was a little.
You need to keep that because I want to see how closely you're able to predict this.
I keep all of our sheets so we can come back to them.
I definitely want to see this, because the way you did this with Sam Hartman being the multiplier and everything else. Good stuff. Good breakdown.
I put some heart into it. Okay, everyone.
You did put a lot into it.
I didn't just throw numbers out there. There was some reasoning behind it.
You came strong. I like it. With that, Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for some rapid fire. It's enough of the numbers. Let's just fire from the hip.
So let's start with this question from Alex with what you were just talking about. If Tobias does get his 1,142 yards this season, do you buy or sell him as a Heisman Trophy finalist?
That's a tough question. So let's look at let's look at
more math. No more math is allowed.
Let's look at Devontae Smith's stats when he was at Alabama, right? He won the Heisman in 2020, and I just want to see what his total receiving yards were in 2020.
I'm going to make it easy for you.
He had 1,800 receiving yards. I don't think that would put him any. I think in order to be a Heisman finalist, you got to be over 1,500 yards as a wide receiver.
I mean, if he has 20 touchdowns or something, I guess. I think that if he gets that number of yards going from 1 catch last year to that number of yards this season, and obviously depending on the kind of season that the team is having, then in that case, I think it is Sam Hartman who is the Heisman Trophy finalist. And as Angelo says, in that case, then potentially Tobias is a Biletnikoff finalist. So I would still like the quarterback. I would still say the quarterback is going to end up being the Heisman finalist. But again, so much of it also depends on what the team is doing. It was easy for Alabama, like Heisman winners the last few years have virtually come out of nowhere. None of them were predicted at the start of the season. When you look back, whether it was the Alabama winners or Caleb Williams, none of these guys were predicted as the Heisman winners. And especially with Alabama, when you're number 1 in the country for most of the season, and there aren't a whole lot of other suitable candidates, that's when the Alabama receiver ends up being the Heisman Trophy winner. That does, that hasn't happened in too many other cases. We all know it's predominantly the quarterbacks, and I think if Tobias has that kind of year, he's Bolitnikoff. Hartman is the Heisman, assuming that Notre Dame is having a really good year.
Yeah, I think 1,200 yards gets him on the Bolitnikoff finalist. I think in order to be taken seriously as a Heisman, you got to have 1,500 yards and like a touchdown per game type. That might get you some Heisman consideration, but I don't think that Tobias is quite ready for that kind of production yet. I think that Sam Hartman has the ability to get him that kind of production, but again, I don't see him quite being ready yet for that type of role.
Okay, now I want to go back really quickly to the equation and all the math that you were just now. Hold on, I'm gonna read this question first, and then I'm going to give you some instruction. Michael says, that was really interesting, Jesse, but I missed how you came up with 0.57 Hartman effect. This was your multiplier in how you came up with the yardage for Notre Dame. Was that just an arbitrary factor that you came up with, or are there some stats behind that? Now, I want you to remember, you're the math major and engineer in this room. Most of us, I would say the majority of us, are not near the level you're on, with the math. So dumb this down a little bit. Explain it to me like you're explaining it to an 8-year-old, how you came up. Now, I'm not saying Michael needs explaining like that, but like explain it in the simplest form you can, how you came up with that 0.57 as the multiplier, as the Sam Hartman factor in your math.
Yeah. So what I did in order to get the Sam Hartman multiplier is I took the receiving yards from the top 8 wide receivers last year of Wake Forest, and then I took the receiving yards of the top 8 wide receivers for Notre Dame, and I did a percent increase between those numbers, and that yielded a 0.57. So all you take is Wake Forest yards minus Notre Dame yards divided by Notre Dame yards, and you get a percent increase, and that was my multiplier.
So that was the multiplier.
Okay. Basically, the difference between Notre Dame's receiving yards last year and Wake Forest's receiving yards last year, and I attribute those numbers, or the gap between those numbers, to Sam Hartman.
Well done. Beautifully done. All right, let's move on. JD Bertrand spent some time this offseason talking to former NFL linebackers Sean Lee and Luke Kuechly. Here's a quote from Bertrand recently. I just came to Coach Golden and Laurinaitis and asked them, who do I really remind you of? Both of them, without knowing each other's answers, said Sean Lee. So, Jesse, first, Sean Lee, probably the best Dallas Cowboys linebacker of the last 20 or so years. I don't know if you agree with that. First of all, that's when he was healthy and in his prime. What do you think of that comparison?
I think the Sean Lee comparison is very good to a point. I think the only difference that I would really point out, Sean Lee was athletic and more fluid in his game, and I think that's only because he played safety and got converted down to a linebacker. Well, that really helped him in terms of being quicker and just more fluid, right? And I think that's just, you have to be a little bit more athletic overall to be a safety than you do a linebacker. And I think he was a little bit slimmed down and trimmed up compared to Bertrand too because of this reason.
Yeah. He was a safety in high school, became an outside linebacker at Penn State, and then when he moved to the NFL, they moved him to middle linebacker. You're right. I completely agree. Like, just from the athleticism and fluidity, I think that Sean Lee is the better linebacker. But from the diagnosis and knowing where to be and all of those things, I think it's a pretty good comparison.
Oh, yeah. I think outside of everything else, that's a very good comparison. I just think that the only noticeable glaring difference is just a tick in speed and overall agility would lean towards Sean Lee.
Yeah, I agree. The unfortunate thing with him is because of the fact that he was, he put on maybe 15 or 20 pounds by the time he got to the NFL, but he was still didn't have
linebacker.
Yeah, he was especially for a middle linebacker, and
Now,
I
would
just
you
his
say that
body
he
just
kind of
couldn't hold up.
started that trend though? Because typically linebackers in the NFL were bulky and you didn't really necessarily need good speed, right? Like Dick, and then you start thinking about now, you see a lot of like, you remember when like Buda Baker got moved down to linebacker from the Cardinals?
Hmm.
He was a safety that got converted down to linebacker. I think Sean Lee kind of was at the beginning of that trend almost. Guys maybe a little bit undersized linebacker playing a linebacker position. And I think that just shows the shift of the overall game in the NFL. A lot less of the power run and more of spreading you out
Yeah,
with wide receivers and stuff. I think
you've
that
got to
is
cover
where it
more
started.
space. Yeah, it's like around that time, around that time, Lee had been in the league, I think, for a couple of years, and Manti was having the big year he was having at Notre Dame, and you still thought of middle linebackers as that, pluggy kind of guy, more with the Manti Te'o build, like your Dick Butkus and Mike Singletary, Zach Thomas, and those kind of guys, like Junior Seau, even who is maybe a little bit, more elevated athlete than any of those guys that I even just mentioned, but still definitely a more stout fire plug type middle linebacker guy. Where you're exactly right. As the league has gone to, and even college as well has gone to, you've got to cover a lot more space. Those are the kind of body types typically that you see. And you're right. Sean Lee might have been kind of at the forefront of that. So James Laurinaitis helped connect Bertrand to both of those guys, Sean Lee and Luke Kuechly. Here's another quote from Bertrand. He put me in contact with both of them, and so I sat down. Sean Lee was awesome. He sat there for like an hour, 30 minutes on the phone, just let me pick his brain. Kuechly answered every single one of my questions. Going off that, I was able to learn the kind of things they did watching film, and so I kind of created an outline. And then this summer, every single week, I chose Navy, I chose USC. And so each week I would act like Saturday was the game we were playing, and I'd walk through trying to watch film the way they did, as if it's Sunday, it's Monday, all the way through. And this is what they did. So I'm trying to do it for that team. And then each new week came around, new week, new team. End quote. What do you think of all that?
I think that this is someone who's very committed to improving their game, right? He heard the criticism last year, and I think he wants to step up and be the overall leader of the defense. And he took the opportunity not only to train, and I think what really is interesting about this is most guys just train themselves physically in the offseason. Bertrand trained himself physically and he trained himself mentally by watching film and preparing like it was a game week. He is now breaking down film and setting himself up with a routine for the entire season. So, like I said, guys in the offseason do as much as they can physically to be ready for the season. He did that and matched it mentally, which I've never really seen people do before. I've never heard of a guy, especially in the college level, who will sit down and watch as much film as he did, because what he's doing is he did an entire season basically of game weeks, right? 12 games in each week. So 12 games, that's about 3 months. And that's, again, what the season is going to be. And so the fact that he mentally trained himself is impressive. To have that kind of ambition, or someone who can self kickstart himself like that. No one told him to do
Right.
that. He just wanted to do that to get better.
And now he's already gone through his dry run. And the fact, one, that you're able to pick the brains of two guys who were both Pro Bowl linebackers in the NFL, Kuechly and Lee, and you basically take their blueprint and he's got it. He's done this dry run through the season. Now he's in training camp. He doesn't have to worry about it for a few weeks. And now he's already done it with Navy. So when Navy week comes back around, he's already, he's already done it for Navy. You would just expect that he's going to know basically every team inside and out. Now, there are going to be some, some tweaks and, subtle stuff from season to season, but like you would expect that, you talk about the ability to play fast and process and, all this different stuff. I mean, you would quite honestly just expect to see a completely different level JD Bertrand this season, don't you think?
I think JD Bertrand's going to take his game to the next level, because I've talked about this before. Your mental game is such a big aspect at linebacker, because you have to be able to read and react, and so you can't react unless you're reading. And he's finding ways to efficiently improve how he goes about making his reads.
Yeah. See how this whole thing kind of shakes out for him. It's going to be really interesting to follow and see what kind of season that he has. But I mean, already we've seen him at practice where he's coaching up the young guys like Jalen Sneed the other day and doing that kind of stuff. So it's going to be really, really interesting. You were, of course, a linebacker, Jesse, in college. If you had the chance to talk to guys like that, what are maybe one or the two of the top questions that you would ask them?
I think that would be the first question I would ask is how you go about watching film. That would be the top, how you're breaking it down, what you're looking for. And then I think my next question would be, what are some of your top tip points? Meaning, if you're reading a defense, what's something that is a really good indicator of, pass or run, essentially. What and based on maybe formation and splits, what you can expect by just like quick things that you can pick up on to help you diagnose things a little bit quicker. Like
What are your keys? Yeah.
what are those keys that are helping you, maybe diagnose run pass, or maybe and not only that, but you can tell by certain splits where the run motion is going. Maybe because of a split, they're trying to accomplish a jet sweep, or maybe a run off the tackle. Maybe with shorter splits, they're looking for something up the middle. But yeah, I think those are the things I would look for, because they can give you indication to run pass. And not only that, and if it's going to be run, where the run is probably going to be going. So I think those would be my top questions.
All right. Good stuff. Fill in the blank on this next one. Notre Dame tight ends Kevin Bauman and Eli Raridan are both coming back from ACL injuries. Raridan tore his in October, about a month after Bauman tore his ACL. It's blank. Both are trying to be ready to go by Notre Dame's season opener.
It's optimistic that both these guys are trying to be ready for the beginning of the season. And honestly, it's kind of timid too. I don't know how to put timid into the fill in blank. But it's a timid thing, because these guys, like, it's so hard with knee injuries, because even when you think things are 100%, you still go out there and your knee is compromised. And I don't think you really know it, because once you tear it once, the likelihood of number 2 happening is greater than what you did for number 1. So I would just be really timid for these guys. And I'm sure they're timid being out there on the practice field, but you don't truly know until you're out there in a game situation, because there's nothing that can match or simulate a game situation.
And that's the thing, like with Raridan especially, like Bauman has been on the bicycle. He hasn't been on the field nearly as much. Raridan has been out there on the field, but when he tore his last October, it was his second tear in 10 months. He's already torn the same one twice. He tore it in December of 2021, of like playing basketball in his senior season, and then he tears it 10 months later. And it seems very ambitious, to try to be pushing to come back that quickly, especially after you've already done it twice. And I know these guys are competitors and they want to be out there and all that kind of stuff, but I would just think that I would be erring on the severe side of caution in trying to push it to get back that soon. I know that guys are coming back sooner and sooner from this kind of stuff, but like especially in Raridan's case, when you've already done it twice in the span of less than a year, I just think that I would be really cautious trying to come back that soon and be back in a game that soon. Like, honestly, if I were him, based on the way the schedule shakes out, I would be much more looking toward Ohio State than I would at Navy or Tennessee State, for that matter, that early in the season. That's just me. It's obviously their decision and the training staff.
Yeah, it's questionably optimistic. And that's the thing, is they have to be getting feedback from someone, but it just seems a little bit too early. I would have reservations about the first kind of 3 games of the season, especially considering it being Navy, Tennessee State, and then who's the third one? I don't think it's anyone of great power, but it's like I would rather Central Michigan. I'd much rather have them, 100, and I know this isn't really possible. I'd rather have them 110% than like 100% or 95% at the beginning of the season, because they're going to need to rely on these guys in the blocking game at some point. And I think if they want to accomplish a lot of these, run schemes, power run schemes, they're going to need these bigger body tight ends. And we know, and this is, I don't know what this is going to look like for Jared Parker, but we know Notre Dame likes to use a lot of tight ends in various different sets, right? Whether that's 21 personnel, 22 personnel. I mean, heck, sometimes we've seen 3 tight ends on the field at one time. So these guys are going to be leaned on, and it's more so than just the receiving game. It's what they can do as blockers and really help the run game.
Mm-hmm. From the mailbag yesterday, brought it back today. If you were Notre Dame's athletic director, would you rather schedule a home-and-home series with Penn State or Tennessee?
I'm a fan of playing teams out of region and teams you don't necessarily play a lot. I know Notre Dame played Tennessee in like the early, like what felt like 2004, 2005 timeframe.
Mm-hmm.
They were on the schedule then. I just think that they play enough of the Big Ten teams in the area. So I'm a fan of going out of like and especially if you can add a SEC team to the schedule, I just feel like that gives them better weight nationally, right? Like people respect the SEC, right? Like everyone talks about how great the SEC is every year and how loaded they are. Well, add a SEC team, see what Notre Dame looks like against a SEC team. I'm not that I don't think Penn State would be a fun game. I think it would be a great game, but I'm just more interested in what the benefit is for Notre Dame at the end of the season. I think a SEC team on the schedule holds more weight than a Big Ten opponent. It's just someone that you're not used to playing, and I like that. It's like I liked that South Carolina game last year because I thought it was a good standing of where Notre Dame was at, in comparison.
Interesting. The majority are going with, not a steep majority, but more people saying Tennessee than Penn State. I'd rather see it be Penn State because, they used to play Penn State quite regularly back in the 80s and the 90s and, I guess early 90s. And, I guess it's really been very early 90s and into the 80s because the fact that Penn State went to the Big Ten, and I don't think that they played very much, if at all, since then. That's pretty much about the time the series ended. They did play, what was that, 06, 07, I believe, in that range. They played a home and home, but that's been pretty much it. I would rather see Penn State just because they were at one time a kind of a regular on the schedule, and they were a rival. And British Boy makes a good point, Penn State, because we can further recruit Pennsylvania high school talent by beating their state team. There's more talent in Pennsylvania than Tennessee. That's a great point as well. So, yeah, Chi-Town said 07. They played them at home the year before that as well. I believe they went to Penn State in that disastrous 07 season, but they played them at home the year before that in 06. So
I think Irish Boy, I think that's a really good point about, I don't know if you just said that, but the ability to beat Penn State in their home state and really dominate the Pennsylvania area in recruiting. I mean, that's not a bad point. I think a lot of good recruits do come out of that area. So I don't know how much they could steal from Tennessee or, SEC really from the South. And so if you can kind of expand more in your area, the Midwest, it kind of makes sense. But I'm still buying Tennessee in the end of the day.
Okay. All right. I think everyone's going to see it a little bit different. And then, again, simple majority, at least right here, saying Tennessee than Penn State. But, it's another SEC school. They played their share here recently, and they have played Tennessee before. I'd just rather see.
Do we think that the this new variation in the chat, LAMREHK, I think that's a variation of Derek, if we're being honest. I think he's changed his name. I think he's changed his name again. I'm on to him though.
It looks like it. I think you're right.
It's like the combination of his last name, like half and half, I think.
Uh-huh. So according to multiple reports, Big Ten presidents have given Commissioner Tony Petitti permission to explore, or the go-ahead to explore expansion with Oregon and Washington as the top targets. So if you're the Pac-12, what do you do? Is there any hope?
Honestly, I don't know if there's anything you can do. I think everyone that is I think that they're all going to get poached, and it's
I mean, if
funny
you're the
because
Pac-12, you've got to be on the phone with Boise State, I think, at this point. It's just like, okay, now's the time, Boise. Come on over.
it's funny. Last week when you were out, Vince had a rapid fire question of who do you think would be the next Pac-12 schools to leave. I'm not going to say I called it, but Oregon and Washington were my two choices. I know it's not that hard of a thing to guess, but I think that is. I think that's what's going to happen. And I ultimately think if they lose Oregon and Washington, that they might have to fold. And I think the rest of the Pac-12 might get kind of dispersed out. I just don't. If you lose USC, UCLA, and Oregon, the three most probably prominent schools, and then you add Washington, who's been really solid over the last 10 years. I don't know how you can make it without basically your top four teams in the last decade.
I don't think the way it sounds, I don't think these schools necessarily want to, especially like Arizona State and Utah. Apparently, like the Big 12 is voting today on Arizona and Arizona State. And Arizona State, I guess, and Utah, neither one of them really want to go to the Big 12. The problem is, especially if you lose Oregon and Washington, the two best football programs that you have right now, what are you going to do? Like, you're already down to 9 teams as it is. So if you lose them, you not only lose your two best remaining programs, but you're also down to 7. And what are you going to just, combine forces with the Mountain West Conference? Like I've seen some people suggest like a Pac-12 ACC merger, and I suppose that could work.
Yeah, but those are opposite sides of that's like coast to coast.
But does it matter? I mean, USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten. Does any of it matter anymore?
I guess so.
I mean, that's the thing. Because it would be brutal, like to go from Washington State, and Pullman to
Virginia Tech
to Virginia Tech or Miami, any of those places, like just the distance that you'd have to go to get down there. And then Oregon State in Corvallis. I just don't see any hope for the Pac-12. There might be some conference that's the Pac something, but it's probably going to be just a bunch of leftovers of Mountain West Conference teams with Oregon State and Washington State. And, Cal and Stanford, I think, want in, but it doesn't sound like the Big Ten is very high on getting, either one of them. And I don't think they provide much value for anybody.
So are these conferences going to rename themselves now that there's no longer 10 teams and like 12 teams?
It's a good question.
Because I think it's stupid.
They've kept the numbers for branding. Like the Big Ten has been the Big Ten forever, even though it was, 1 million teams in there. They still called themselves the Big Ten. Do you like the moves potentially if the Big Ten makes them, though? If they get Oregon and Washington?
I'm not a fan of all this restructuring in general, to be honest with you. I don't like the idea of big mega super conferences. I like things how they were, but I think people are greedy and it comes down to money and contracts at the end of the day, unfortunately. Yep. And it's just annoying. Like I would just enjoy to have, the Power 5 conferences and have them be pretty equal in teams, So I don't like it. And I think what's going to happen with the Pac-12, I just think there's going to be basically, there's going to be the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. I think the remaining teams in the Pac-12 are just basically going to get drafted off by the remaining big conferences. I don't think they're going to fold into the Big West. I don't think they're going to fold to the Mountain West. I don't think they're going to become independent. I just think they're going to fold in and be equally distributed between the remaining power conferences.
Yeah. If Oregon and Washington are lucky, even though there's a lot of distance that has to be made, they'll cash bigger checks. They'll be in the Big Ten, and I guess USC, they were pretty happy. One of the reasons they got out, not only the money, but they kind of wanted to distance themselves from Oregon. And now you could have USC and Oregon back in the same conference. Once again, it's just a mess. And I agree with what you're saying. I don't think any of it's good. It's one thing when you're talking about the football teams doing this, but it's a completely different thing when you're talking about swimming and track and volleyball and all these other sports that have to make these treks across the country. I just think it's completely gotten out of hand at this point. But you're absolutely right. It's all about the bottom line. It's the dollars. That's it. NFL's Hall of Fame game is tonight in Canton between the Jets and the Browns. Scale of 1 to 10. What's your interest?
My overall interest is a 2 out of 10. It's funny. My girlfriend is going with some friends. I am doing a podcast and watching Game 4 of the Cubs and Reds tonight because that matters to me more in this current situation. So
But you're saying if you weren't doing the podcast, you would be down there at the game as well?
I would be not going because I'm watching the Cubs and Reds.
Okay.
It is an important game tonight. If the Cubs win, they take the series 3-1. If the Cubs lose, it's just a wash in a 2-2 series. So while it's fun that the football season is starting and it is the Browns, and I live in Cleveland and Canton, which is about 30 minutes south of me, that all sounds fun. But I'm going to be honest with you. The Browns are really annoying me because I have Browns fans who keep sending me Cowboys videos from training camp. And I'm like, guys, leave me alone. It's day 3 of training camp. I don't care that Dak threw an interception.
That's right.
I don't care if Deuce Vaughn is taking reps at running back and he's 5'5". I don't care if Trayvon Diggs is trash talking Dak Prescott. It is training camp, Leave me alone. How about you make the playoffs for more than one time in 20 years?
They haven't even played a preseason game yet, and everyone wants to.
That's what I
everybody
mean.
apart.
Just it's training camp. You're meant to let the ball loose. You're meant to take chances because there's no repercussions. You're kind of just figuring it out, right? So like, I have a lot of Browns fans who just think they're really funny sending me all this Cowboy stuff, and it's really annoying me. So I am disinterested in everything Browns right now.
Like there are a lot of NFL teams who can make, poke fun at Cowboys fans. Cleveland Browns fans,
not one of them.
Not one of them. And I would throw the New York Jets in there for that matter as well. Not one of them. Neither one of those. And like for both of these teams, if the quarterbacks were even going to play one snap, maybe I'd have some interest. I'll probably watch for a little bit. It is at least fun to have that, the Hall of Fame game is always the first game. It comes on and all that, but Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play. Deshaun Watson's not going to play. And I mean, that's really for the Jets. It's like, I'll just wait until Hard Knocks next week and see the stuff that the Jets didn't want us to see, I guess. So I put it at about a 2 as well. Pretty low, I think. Your Cubs, though, tearing it up the last 2 nights. What is it, 36 runs the last 2 nights?
But here, I'm going to say this, though. As fun as the last 2 nights have been, it really doesn't matter if the Cubs lose tonight because it's a 2-2 wash of the series. It doesn't matter how many runs you score in your 2 wins. Like, it's impressive. It's great that they scored all these runs. But again, it doesn't matter if you lose to Cincinnati tonight because all those runs don't matter because it's a 2-2 wash. You didn't gain any games in the standings. So it really doesn't matter, in my opinion. Like, it's fun to watch, and I'm like, yeah, I love the outbursts and offense and everything, but you still get I care more about winning a series. You could have 100 combined runs, but if you lose the series, I really don't care.
But if they win tonight, they win the series, right?
Correct. I will really relish in all these runs scored if they are able to win the game tonight. Then it means something to me. But again, it doesn't mean these 2 games doesn't mean anything if they can't win tonight and take the series.
Chi-Town says he's been to a Hall of Fame game and it was a good time. And that's, the thing about probably being at the game is don't they introduce like all the Hall of Famers and stuff like that? Like it's different, I think, to be able to be there and see
more of an experience than the game itself.
Exactly. The game itself, still just the first preseason game, and they're not going to play any of the starters and any of that kind of stuff. But good times. Good times. All right. Announcement tomorrow. We're going to do the rapid fire show, of course, at 5:00. Tomorrow is going to be the final Friday rapid fire show because if you remember back to last season, we didn't start doing the rapid fire shows on Friday until after the season ended. So we'll have the rapid fire show tomorrow, and then we're going to start gearing up, getting ready for game week coming up. We won't have another Friday rapid fire show until probably sometime in December, something like that, after the season ends. So join us tomorrow, 5 o'clock. Sure to have a lot of fun. And did I say thanks to the guy who put up the super chat earlier? If not, thank you.
Michael
very much.
Mahoney
Michael,
gave me a
thank you.
tip for my Excel sheet. I appreciate that, brother.
That's right. So tomorrow, 5 o'clock, be here. It'll be all three of us will be here. Jesse, Vince, and I will be here for the Rapid Fire Show at 5. So we will talk to you then. Have a good one. Hit the like button as you leave us tonight. And of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you mañana on IB Nation Sports Talk.